crossbow had another weakness: its loading time. A crossbowman could only shoot 3 to 4 bolts a minute. On the other hand, the English longbow archer was a highly skilled soldier, although the weapon itself was easily made, usually from a single piece of pliable wood. It took a lot of training for a longbowman to become effective, and at close range could penetrate most forms of armor. Chainmail would still be easily penetrated at 100 yards, and quilted armor would have no chance against a longbow, even at longer ranges. What was most effective about this weapon was its rate of fire. A skilled longbow archer could manage 17 aimed shots a minute. Each side also had the opportunity to use primitive cannons. It is believed that the English had cannons with them, while the French did not. This weapon was not ideal for actual killing, but was a definitive psychological weapon against soldiers who hadn't witnessed it before, as it made a loud sound and a great impact when it landed. Although England and France had similar weaponry, their tactics were largely different. The French still believe in the mounted men-at-arms as a supreme weapon of choice. They would use them as shock forces against enemies, and roll up on their lines as they charged through. Their way of fighting was primarily offensive. So at Crecy, the plan was to advance the crossbowmen, whose purpose would be cause damage from a good distance away to the English lines and hopefully force a withdrawal. From there, the French men-at-arms would charge onward and cut down the retreating English. The English, on the other hand, saw tactics in a defensive manner. They primarily used foot soldiers and had their men-at-arms dismounted in battle. At dawn, the English army took its positions. The archers strung their bows and dug their pits. The soldiers put on their armor and readied for battle, after which they laid in wait atop the ridge. Philip was still unsure if the English were retreating or if they were going to stand and fight. He ordered his army to march northward, so they went through the late August sweltering heat, carrying their heavy armor and equipment. He had his forces turn and walk abreast instead of each division walking behind the other. This order of march eventually broke down and caused massive confusion amongst the soldiers. Soon, separate divisions were marching at their own pace and trying to get to the destination to be the first to fight the English without regards to orders or others. The wagon train, carrying all the supplies, fell greatly behind, and units who were supposed to fight together lost communication between them. By early afternoon, the English atop the ridge could hear the murmur of traveling foot soldiers by the thousands and dust clouds being stirred up as they went. The clouds above were beginning to look heavy with rain, and so they continued to wait. Once Philip got word that the English were standing ground, preparing to fight, he took the advice of one of his commanders to wait till the following day to fight, as the Frenchmen had walked for hours, burdened by heavy loads, and were too tired to fight well. Additionally, it looked as if the skies might open up, creating even more problems. However, to the French forces' demise, the orders were not handed down promptly enough, and it was difficult to stop the train of French soldiers advancing, since some contingents were spread out because of the chaotic march. It is also speculated that some of the French nobles were unwilling to accept the order to stand down, as they had come to fight the English, and they were going to do so. So the crossbowmen advanced across the valley and paused, looking up at the English, and they gave a loud war cry. They raised their bows and shot. The air hissed with arrows, but the arrows had fell short. The English replied with a stone shot from the bombards, which collided close to the Genoese ranks and massively confused them. Few were killed, though. The archers of the Prince of Wales division then raised their longbows, and in one motion released a horrendous volley of arrows that fell among the crossbowmen. The men died in scores. A slaughter ensued. At the sight of so many of them easily falling, the surviving Genoese turned back and began to run. But they were met by the French men-at-arms, who saw their retreat as dishonorable and began to cut them down where they stood. The men-at-arms then regrouped. The trumpets sounded, and the mounted French made their first charge. The carnage resumed as the English archers continued at a long range to cut down the advancing French. The armored men were somewhat protected, but their unarmored horses were not. The English were intentionally aiming at the horses, for they were shooting barbed hunting arrows that stuck in the flesh of the horse. The valley beneath soon erupted in the screaming of dying animals and the yelling of desperate men who were trying to control their mounts. What little amount of order the French had before was now gone. Those men-at-arms who did, by chance, get close to the English ranks fell victim to the pits dug previously, and as Edward III had envisioned, began to shy away from charging at the archers and were directed toward the dismounted soldiers. A melee of horse and man, spear and sword ensued. It was a desperate attempt to break the English lines, or face retreat and slaughter on the part of the French, and the English were desperate to hold their line, as they knew if they did not, the battle could be lost. The Prince of Wales himself, fighting for his life, was an obvious target for the French. This moment in the battle has been passed down through English folklore, as one of the English knights pleaded for aid from King Edward to come and relieve his son's division, and Edward replied, "Let the boy win his spurs." It is said the French charged as many as 15 times against the English line. The images that come to mind are of a nightmare. Dying men and horses, suffocating in mud, and heaps of bodies which became obstacles themselves impeded the still advancing French. Unlike most medieval battles, no ransoms were to be made from captured knights. All would be killed. The loss at Crecy was a huge blunder for France. There is uncertainty of exactly the number dead, but it is estimated that around 4,000 French and Genoese lay dead amongst their horses. The English losses are estimated around 300. But not only had the French lost thousands of men, but most of their nobility. Historians have pondered about what exactly made the English so superior to the French at Crecy, even though they were vastly outnumbered. It is impossible to point to one single factor, such as superiority of the English archers, or the geography of the battlefield, or the tactical innovations on the part of the English. All these things greatly helped the English. However, it was the French forces' own confusion and arrogance on the battlefield that most notably led to their demise. They failed to stop their forces in time in order to rest and not allow Edward to fight a battle of his time and choosing. They failed to advance in an ordered fashion, and the Genoese archers failed to have any impact on the English lines. Most importantly, it was a failure on the part of Philip VI, as he simply did not exercise good leadership. The Battle of Crecy would go down as one of the most bloody and most one-sided battles of the 100 Years' War. It showed on the battlefield that good planning, strong tactics, and avid leadership are able to win a battle against a superior force.